Thank you so much for jumping on our live YouTube stream here at the Addison Public Library. My name is Jody Giannakopoulos. I know you're used to seeing me without a mask, but we're here today for a public performance. We are so fortunate to have Dave Martin with us, doing a special program that he designed and brings to libraries across the area. Here today with us live, and we will have this up on our YouTube channel so that you can invite friends to watch it as well. Just a quick mention that we have a big month for October coming up with a lecture tonight from William Pack. We also have, and that's about spooky stories. We also have Tony the Ghost Hunter on the 18th of October demonstrating his actual ghost hunting equipment, and has a friend who also does ghostology coming with him. In addition, we have on the 21st a burials, tombstones, and cemetery presentation from the Elk Grove Historic Society. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to get out of here, and Dave Martin is going to introduce himself and tell us stories and entertain us. Thank you so much, Dave.
All right, thank you, Jody. I appreciate it. Good afternoon. I am Dave Martin, and I do tell stories, and I do play songs. The songs that I'll be performing today, and the stories that I will be telling, are originals, and the name of this program is Miscellany and Mirth of the Midwest. And so what it is kind of just some snapshots of historical anecdotes that I think are interesting, at times funny, and it sort of weaves in my own family's history because we've been in the Midwest for a long time. And so there are anecdotes and stories of the people and places of my past from my family. But to begin, we're going to start with a very kind of wide-angle historical snapshot far, far away from the Midwest. This is our musical Big Bang and kind of our societal Big Bang, really, because we are going to the Middle East. For the first verse of this first song, we're going to the Middle East, the group of ancient people known as the Mesopotamians, to a place called the Fertile Crescent. And it was here that the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flooded on the same schedule every year. And what that meant is that those floodwaters could be harnessed for the purposes of irrigating their crops. Now, when Mesopotamians began irrigating their crops, it increased crop yields dramatically. And this is going to have a sort of a domino effect of progress for civilization, because with those increased crop yields, they now create a surplus of grain. And that meant that not everyone had to be a farmer anymore for the first time. And so that leads to the creation of cities. And one day, those Mesopotamian farmers decided to play scientists. And they took some of that surplus grain that had been produced, and they fermented it, thereby inventing beer. And they found out that when they consumed this, it would have an intoxicating effect. And to them, this seemed like a much better deal than digging irrigation ditches in the hot sun all day long. Now, those Mesopotamians gave us many other number of things that we enjoy and depend on and use in our civilization today. They gave us the first organized system of writing, the first code of laws, and in their spare time, they even found time to play checkers. But we're going to stick with beer right now, and 5 other drinks, so 6 in total. And we're going to look at how the creation of these drinks coincided with key historical events. It's kind of an unlikely frame for a song, but it's called A History of the World in 6 Glasses. And I think it'll work. I know you'll know all the drinks that are identified in this song. And I would just say that this was originally written for high school sophomores. But I think it'll play well for anyone. So here we go, A History of the World in 6 Glasses. In the Fertile Crescent, 6000 BC, some hard-working farmers dug an irrigation ditch. They got done while the drought said it's tough here, so they fermented their grain and drank till they were in a stitch. Now the world had beer. But I'd like to take you on to southern Europe, there in the Mediterranean. I'll tell you what happened say we're having a great time with the symposium they have, philosophy and sex. It was all fueled by one. It's strange to think of all the history that's been shaped by drinks. In the early modern world, Western Europeans took to the sea and brought Africans thousands of miles to cut sugar in the tropical sun, exchange for copper, gold, and some textiles. Slaves made a global drink called rum. While in the Arab world, the liquor was thrown on trial because of how hyper its consumers would get. And King Charles feared the street would bring on plots. When Java stations came, they were like some early internet. You get news and lied to in coffee shops. It's strange to think of all the history that's been shaped by drinks. Now by the dawn of the 18th century, the Royal Society was drinking tea, and 100 years it'd be. Joy through the empire by everyone. To meet the man, they make it with filler, like sawdust and sheep dung. An American quack named after Pemberton had a soft drinks factories worked toward interchangeable parts. In America, there's a world globalized its ways. That's what Coca-Cola in everyone's hearts. Now it's the world's second most known phrase. The most known phrase worldwide, by the way, is okay. And Coke is number 2. It takes a big sip to quench your mean thirst. But won't you give a thought to history first? It's strange to think of all the history that's been shaped by drinks. Thank you. Thank you, folks. I appreciate that. Thank you. So I might be eating my mask at times. I'll do the best I can with that, but it's kind of slipping down, but here we go. All right, back in place. So we are going to go now to North America. So we're getting a little closer to home, and in fact, we'll find ourselves very near and at home in this song. And I'd like to begin just by saying, in early modern period, Christopher Columbus sort of accidentally bumped into North America. And by the 16th century then, European Puritans had begun populating the coastal colonies along the eastern seaboard of what is now the United States. Now these Puritans were farmers, and they had to have large families. They needed many kids to meet the labor demands of an agricultural workforce. So it's going to start to get a little crowded in those colonies. And if we fast forward a couple hundred years or so, the French and Indian War ended with the Treaty of Paris, which gave control of Florida, Louisiana, and Canada to the British. And what this did is it opened the door to territories west of those colonies. So the white people are going to go up over the mountain ranges out east, descend down through the Ohio Valley, and ultimately spill into the Midwest, into the areas that we live in and call home today. The natives, of course, were the first ones there. And if we look throughout our history in this region, many different people have come at different times to make a life, to start a life, to begin again, right here in the Midwest. And I know that many of those people have paid a steep price to be here, and I figured that I'm a benefactor forefathers and mothers that came before us and left us with all the wonderful food and customs and music and culture that continue to define our region today. So I wanted to write a song that recognized all that, but kind of did it in a celebratory treatment. And I think that's what I aim to do, and I hope what I've done with this song. And this is called Fox Valley, because that's where I live, and we're right in the midst of it, the old Fox Valley. So we're going to look at a few of our cultural inputs, and this is the only song that I'm aware of that refers to the traditional Irish song Molly Malone, the R&B song Mustang Sally, and bratwurst and chocolate in its chorus. A lot of different things going on there, but here we'll give it a shot. Here it's into living as farmers in New England, whose work was never done. They had a bunch of kids who didn't get Christmas. The settlers were no fun. Not till later was it ever even said. The land wasn't settled but stolen instead. And now we got Molly Malone and Mustang Sally, bratwurst and chocolate in the Fox Valley. Living in contrast, that goes all over the past. Heat beats down on the delta, where living's been hard won. People broke free in the last century till the birth of mother's son. With the homeland famine, the no Irish knew to fly. Those Celts sang what they felt and they run in the sky. We got Molly Malone and Mustang Sally, bratwurst and chocolate in the Fox Valley. Living in contrast, that goes all over the past. Now in 2 world wars, the Germans tried to take Europe. It wasn't meant to be. But I'll tell you one thing, those stubborn old Germans sure got Milwaukee. Even presidents have died in neighbors' restaurants. For all the sausage and beer that everyone. And now we got Molly Malone and Mustang Sally, bratwurst and chocolate in the Fox Valley. Living in contrast, the echoes all over the past. I like eating chocolate, so my afternoon snack is peanut M&Ms. Old Max had cocoa beans, Columbus brought them to Spain, and Fritz brought them back again. And from the seas in the north to Poles and Jeff Clark, we all got our pick between milk and dark. Some got Molly Malone and Mustang Sally, bratwurst and chocolate in the Fox Valley. Living in contrast, that goes all over the past. Well, I like living in contrast, that goes all over the past. Thank you, folks. Thank you. All right, so now that we are in the Fox Valley, here in the Midwest, in our home, let's take a look, I guess, at one of our own, a Midwesterner, through and through. This is a guy who was born in Ohio, spent some time in Missouri, and ultimately out in Galena. I'm referring to the 18th president of the United States, Ulysses S. Grant. This is the man who was most well known for being the military commander who won the Civil War for the Union. And it was after that, well, I guess I'll tell you a couple things quick about his service as a military commander. That's really where he earned his stripes. And, you know, it's said about Grant's style that he didn't assert his leadership so much as that he assumed it. So it was not uncommon for him to go in front of troops he commanded, for example, in sort of an unadorned, dirty field jacket. And he had this tattered black hat that he wore. And this prompted one of the soldiers that he led to quip, that he looked like he didn't know whether to find cows if you gave him hay, which I guess in the 18th century was quite a zinger. Excuse me, in the 19th century, I said that incorrectly. But anyway, all I was going to tell you is that after the Civil War, his stock was riding high, and he was implored to run for president. This is something that Grant didn't necessarily want to do, but he felt it was incumbent upon him, appealed to his sense of civic duty, to lead the nation. So he did, for 2 terms. For a long time after Grant's presidency, it was regarded by historians as one of pretty modest success. But in the last 20 years or so, that assessment has started changing among historians, and his standing has improved. New recognition is given to Grant's progressive-mindedness, frankly, on civil rights. And this is where I became interested in writing a song about all this, because I read the epic tome by Ron Chernow, the 935-page book about Grant, so you don't have to out there, because I did it. I'm going to put it in a 3.5-minute song right now, but Ulysses S. Grant did enfranchise black men in this country, gave them the right to vote, and did a lot to ensure that that vote was protected. And, you know, you could make the argument, and if you look at it, it's just positively true, that there was actually greater racial equality in this country during his administration than in the 80 years that followed it. And that was pretty striking to me, so I thought it was worthy of a song and inclusion on our Miscellany and Mirth of the Midwest program here. So this is about the life and times of Ulysses S. Grant. It's called The General. Down the way at St. Luke, hard scrabble farming is all we could find to do. So he went north to Galena for a short time he clerked. Just wasn't cut out for that work. The life he lived never followed a straight line, but more strengths of the general have shown in time. Beneath cannon smoke skies, he took the big money, cutting off rebels' supplies. Beat 'em at Chattanooga, won the war in the end. Then he set fair terms to the defeated men. The life he lived never followed a straight line, but more strengths of the general have shown in time. Well, now the general's next fight Persuasion Washington advancing civil rights. So a new law came and it its right across New England. Yes, and that law gave the vote to black men. Near death, he wrote a book. Make back the money he lost to a swindling crook. Scandal seemed to visit folks he kept at hand. See, the general was a fair plain man. And the life he lived never followed a straight line. The more strengths of the general have shown in time. More strengths of the general have shown in time. Thank you, folks. I hope you can hear me okay.
Sounds great.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little story here. In 1910, Jake Entz, that's E-N-T-Z, and that's German. Jake Entz of Lycoming County, Pennsylvania, in Upper Fairfield Township, decided to get on a train and ride the Shining Rail west. Now, Jake was enticed by word that he'd gotten that Waterloo, Iowa, with its industrial swell, and remember this is early 20th century, so it's right near the height of America, being that it's an industrial powers, right? So, but Jake had heard that Waterloo, with the industrial swell and the railroad terminals that they had there, was a place that was sort of burgeoning with opportunity, so he thought, yeah, I'll give it a shot. So Jake showed up into town, and not too long thereafter, he opened up a cafe. That was called the Entz Cafe, down near the railroad hub, all right? And in 1914, when playing a game of chance, he actually won a 400-acre farm. Someone had actually bet the farm, and Jake was the benefactor of that deal. And his family still all lived in Pennsylvania, brothers and sisters and mom and dad, so he would write letters home kind of telling them what was going on in this new place out on the Midwestern prairie. And seemed like he was getting along rather nicely, so his brothers and sisters some of them are going to start to get caught by the lure of this place out on the Midwestern prairie, and they're going to come west as well. Jake's brother, Adam Entz, was a diminutive man, little guy. Poised and industrious, Adam arrived in Waterloo in 1912, and he opened up a meat counter on East 4th Street in downtown Waterloo. So this neat little symbiotic family kind of business dynamic was born, because food that was produced on the farm that had been won would supply both the cafe and now the meat market. And these were hardworking people who generally thought that drawing attention to oneself was distasteful. And it makes me wonder what they would think of the cell phone culture that we've created today. And in fact, we're going to try to imagine that for just a moment. Let's just say, okay, person born in 1890. Let's just say there's a person born in 1890 standing in front of me. This is what that interaction might look like. Remember, these are very humble people. Drawing attention to oneself, they think, is distasteful. But here, a person born in 1890, I'm going to take out of my pocket a phone. Yes, I keep my phone in my pocket. But I never use the phone to call anyone on. But there's a camera with this phone that's built in. And I take thousands of pictures with the camera on this phone. So a person born in 1890, you're going to stand there, and I'm going to take out my pocket phone, and I'm going to take your picture. And your picture will appear instantly on the screen of this phone. But not only that, I'll do you one better, person born in 1890, because when your photo appears on the screen of this phone, touch of a button, I can apply a filter that will render your face in the likeness of a house cat. Pretty cool, huh? So I don't know if you're familiar with the cat face filter, but that's what is in question right now. So all I was really going to say, though, folks, is that these were industrious people who thought that drawing attention to oneself was distasteful. But one luxury that Adamites, in particular, on occasion indulged in were diamonds. They like to wear sparkling diamonds. And so this is going to get him into some trouble one day, because Adamites is wearing a diamond stick pin. And that was sort of in fashion, in men's fashion in those days, early 1920s. He's wearing a diamond stick pin on his tie. And he's working there at the market. When in walks a local common criminal by the name of Del Odell. And now I have to cue the minor chord, because you know something scary is going to happen, right? So Del Odell walks in, sees the proprietor Adamites wearing the diamond stick pin, and Del Odell, the local common criminal, thinks to himself, he thinks, well, this seems like a well-appointed individual. And then Del's second thought is, and I think I'd like to have that diamond. So his third thought is, I'm going to follow this guy home. And that's what happened. And now I will play the song, which was taken directly from the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier headline after the event happened in 1923. And the headline read, "Owner of Ents Market robbed," with an exclamation point. So that's the name of this song. I'll play it for you. And then there's more to tell after I'm done playing the song, because really it's been great talking to you folks. So here's the song. Adamites, Frenemy Market by the rail hub, and his brother James used to sweep the floors and get some grub. Young men taking on America in the roaring 20s. But the riffraff catches on and he got a little money. Now the owner of the Ents Market gets robbed. Del Odell did the job. Cleaned up a little bum breaking in, but one of Mr. Ents' diamond stick pin. So he cut the legs and went. Adamites came home. A blow to the head was waiting for him. Going with Miss Meyer, who's Del Odell minded by trade. Lately she's been talking about the home they never made. So Del did the beat, he skipped, got busted when he returned to town. When Scott fell back to Cheryl's prison bound. Now the owner of the Ents Market is proud to stupid up, did the job. He got the little bomb breaking in, but he wanted Mr. Ents' diamond stick pin. So he got the lights and then Adamites came home. Blow to the head was waiting for him. Life for medicine is not so glamorous. Del appealed for come and see when he was still amorous. He returned to Miss Meyer, only to rob her joy. He got sent up against her, stay away from the bad boys. Now the owner of the Ents Market is robbed. Del Odell did the job. He cleaned out the little bum breaking in, but he wanted Mr. Ents' diamond stick pin. So he cut the lights and then Adamites came home. Blow to the head was waiting for him. Blow to the head was waiting for him. But wait just a minute. There is more to tell. And so here it is. So you heard in the song what happened. But Del Odell did not rob Adamites that night that he followed him home from the market. But what he did is he tracked him for a couple of weeks or so. He kind of kept an eye on his habits and routines. He saw when he would come and go. Yeah, creepy, right? And but then Del returned to Adam's house when he knew that Adam would be working. at the market, and that's when Dell broke into the house, cleaned out all the valuables, loaded them up into his touring sedan. However, he did not find, throughout the course of robbing the home, he did not find the diamond stick pin, which is what started this whole thing, which is what he saw in the first place and what he really wanted. So when he didn't find that, he thought, oh man, I gotta stick around and wait till this guy comes home and rob him because he's probably wearing the diamond. And that's exactly what happened. So Dell cut the electricity. When Adam walked in the front door, went to turn on the lights, he hears hands up, and before he can react, boom, lead pipe to the head. Ouch, ouch, knocks him out cold. Dell grabs the diamond. Off he goes in his touring sedan to Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now, to make a long story longer, let me tell you about Minneapolis, Minnesota in the 20s and part of the early 30s. It was one of the most corrupt towns in America because there was a crooked sheriff and it was a pay-to-play kind of deal where if you were a criminal or a gangster or anyone in the underworld, you could pay a nominal fee, a reasonable sum, to the cops. And you could then stay in Minneapolis as long as you wanted. You could find a place to stay, you could find a girl, you could sort with underworld figures, other underworld figures, and be left alone by the cops. The only caveat to this deal was you could not commit a crime in the city limits of Minneapolis. So Minneapolis in these days is a place that is teeming with criminals, and yet it is largely a crime-free city and a very safe place to be. Gotta love humanity, right? So anyway, Dell goes up there, he pawns all the wares that he took. He runs out of money, he returns to Waterloo, he is arrested and put on trial and convicted and sent to Fort Madison Federal Penitentiary in southern Iowa. Now, Jake and Adam Entz were my great-great-uncles. So the man who was robbed was my uncle. And so a neat item that I have in my possession is the copy of a letter from the Fort Madison Federal Penitentiary written by the robber man, Mr. Dell O'Dell, addressed to my great-great-uncle Adam, whom he robbed and assaulted. Why was the guy who robbed and assaulted my uncle writing him a letter saying thank you? Well, Mr. O'Dell was coming up for parole, and my uncle Adam agreed to put in a kind word to the prison parole board on his behalf, basically saying, give the guy a shot, which was a pretty big thing to do. So, a couple more things, but we're going to start to tie this up right now. What happened to these people, you might be wondering? Well, Dell O'Dell got paroled. He never made it on the lawful side of life. He got out of prison, but then when I was researching him for the purposes of this song, I found out that he was back in prison over the next 20 years, in and out, for different things, until the trail on him went cold, and I don't know where he ended up or when he died. My uncle Adam did get a fractured skull from the lead pipe to the head on the night of the robbery, but he made a recovery, got headaches for the rest of his life, but he recovered fully. And he lived to be 95, and he died in the mid-1980s, and I don't know if I ever met him because I was just a baby, but that was kind of the addendum to his story. So how did I ever, get this letter in my possession? Well, when I would go out and visit my grandparents on their farm, yes, my grandfather's farm is the same farm that was won by Jake Entz in 1914 in the poker game that I started talking with. This whole thing started with that, right? So maybe you put that together, and that's good of you if you've done that. But anyway, I would go out and stay with my grandparents, and my grandfather told me this story when I was a little boy, 8, 10 years old, something like that. It came out at some point. And I heard it, and it just about took the roof off the house for me. I thought it was the coolest thing. I always loved stories, and to know that this was so closely connected to the family. I mean, this was the family. It was rich with lore and history, and I loved it. So, on more than one occasion, I struck a deal with my grandparents that while I was staying out there, if I behaved during the homily of Sunday morning Mass, after church, we would drive by the house where the robbery took place while my grandfather recounted in precise detail the events of that night. And then I would go to bed later that night, scared and exhilarated. And that's about the story, really. So thanks for hanging with me for about 12 or 13 minutes through that. And now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my grandfather. His name was Joe Entz, and he was born in Waterloo, Iowa. And he grew up there on a farm that is situated on some of the blackest, most fertile dirt on the planet Earth. My grandfather was a kid during the Great Depression. He recounted this to me, and I always thought it was neat that in those days, the small 10-acre cornfield north of the orchard there at the farmstead was taken out of row crop agricultural production and converted into a large vegetable garden for the procurement of additional food sources, just in case. These were, after all, responsible Germanic people. And so after the Depression, my grandfather went to school, and he graduated from Upper Iowa University in Fayette, Iowa in 1942, which was pretty rare for a farm kid in those days. And at that point, the war was on. He enlisted in the Marine Corps. And he shipped out when he was nearly mortally wounded conducting a beach landing in the Mariana Islands of the Pacific theater of World War II. And they took him to Hawaii to convalesce from those injuries. And he served as a military policeman in the Hawaiian Islands for a short time thereafter. This was when the war was wrapping up, and eventually he made it home to Waterloo to start his career as a farmer and to ultimately get married and have a family during the golden age of the American family farm. And in the decades that followed World War II, the farm prospered. It was a very diverse operation, totally sort of emblematic of the classic Midwestern family farm. I mean, they had beef cows and dairy cows, chickens and hogs and corn and soybeans and oats and hay. And it just was. It was the classic Midwestern family farm. So much so, really, that the town kids from Waterloo would come out to the farm for their field trips so that they could ride a hay wagon up the lane and milk a cow and kind of get a taste of the country living. And by the time that I started going out to the farm in the 90s, the basis of the operation was corn and soybeans, and they had beef cows for a short time there. They still had some beef cows. But I loved it. I grew up around here, really, in the suburbs, and it was such a departure for me, and it just fueled a sense of adventure to go out and hang out on the farm and to spend time alongside my grandfather. And I'd ride in the cab of the John Deere 4450 tractor with him, and I'd feed cows with him. On a lot of those trips, we'd take a ride over to the local implement dealer, the John Deere dealer, and we'd look at the big tractors and then go in the store, and he'd give me a little 1/32 scale toy John Deere tractor for my carpet farming operation, as it were, in those days. But most of our mornings started at what was known in the common parlance as the agricultural seminar, the Ag Seminar. Now, the Ag Seminar took place in one of two spots, and the first was at Eagle Center Tap. Eagle Center Tap was tan, squat hovel of a brick building with a kind of a tar and gravel roof, and it stood out in a cornfield on Eagle Road. And the other location was the Farm Service Store, known as FS. You could think of the Ag Seminar as BS at FS. This is where the retired farmers in the neighborhood would congregate between about 8:40 and 9 a.m. weekday mornings. They'd talk crop prices, weather, politics. They'd sip coffee, and I'd drink in, both a can of pop, really, and the delicious, politically incorrect sort of timbre of their discourse. And I learned a lot, and I loved it. And the farm was an important formative sanctuary for me, so I'll take you back with me now to those days and a song that I call Kid on the Farm, written about that time. I wrote this when my grandfather died about 8 years ago now. All my days were big and new and charmed, and they were simple good times as a kid on the farm. My grandfather taught me the story how we got here from Sleeping Night Hill. All it took was this crazy uncle winning a poker and singing for 100 acres on a 50 bill. Approaching from Washburn Road, it's Island was the first thing that you'd see. Soon the farmers in view, they were waving at you. It always felt like coming home to me. The time I was 4, I was glued to his side. The love of the land will not be denied. And we hit the fields with lunch in a pail and bed linens in tow. Or I'd sleep a while on the long days, sit on his back and let me steer down the roads. Approaching from Washburn Road, the big silo was the first thing that you'd see. Soon the farmers in view, they were waving at you. It always felt like coming home to me. As a young man setting out to make my rounds, when he and my grandma left the farm and moved into town. Well, last night there I realized the tender days had come to an end. Well, we buried him this summer, but what a privilege for a boy to have known such a man among men. Approaching from Washburn Road, the big silo was the first thing that you'd see. Soon the farmers in view, they were waving at you. It always felt like coming home to me. Oh, it always felt like coming home to me. Get on the farm. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll do a couple more probably here before we wrap up. And I'd like to play, when I was putting this show together, I wanted to showcase a strong woman who is connected to the Midwest that I thought people might not know the story of. And so who I settled on was a woman by the name of Mabel Wilbrant. And she was an assistant attorney general in the United States in the 20s. Yeah, really through the 20s, most of the 20s. And her claim to fame is that she engineered the idea of putting away organized crime figures for income tax evasion. Now that connects her to the Midwest because a local boy, Mr. Al Capone, and a mafia kingpin, was actually sent to Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary for income tax evasion. That's how they kidnapped him. They could never get these organized crime figures for, the real stuff that they did because they would never do the dirty work themselves. They had other people take care of that. But Mabel Wilbrant had a shrewd legal mind, and she said, I bet these guys aren't paying taxes on the sale of illegal liquor and all this other stuff that they're up to. And I bet if we can infiltrate, we can find that out, and then we'll have, probable cause or justification for putting them on trial and convicting them. And so that's what happened. And that's how this song came about. They called the agents that she directed Mabelmen. So the hook for this song is I want to be a Mabel man. I want to work for Mabel and put away the bad guys. And what I wanted to do when I was writing this song is I wanted to kind of do it in the treatment of the 1920s and 30s era Tin Pan Alley kind of a song that was very celebratory of its subject matter, like we're all in for Mabel, you know. And I wanted to throw some jazz chords in there because this is the jazz age after all, the time in question. And I think that's really all you need to know about this song. This is the story of Mabel Wilbrant and how she came to be who she came to be. All right. Mabel, Mabel, growing up dirt on Kansas plain. The shack flooded the kitchen table was her wrapped in the rain. As she first lady of the law, I clean up crooked town. Yes, and you better know you can't keep a strong woman down. So who will bring us law and order? Oh, you know she can. Don't wanna be a whiskey pirate, no, I won't. Here are the jazz chords. We go in our billboards, become so thin. She leaves their charge for postage. Busted up again, cause one is a slam door. They was up with the good female for saying, come on, a little bit more. Someone's gonna give us that law and order. Oh, you know she can. Don't wanna be a whiskey pirate, no, I won't. Thank you, folks. I think we'll do one more song here. I appreciate you spending your time with me this afternoon and hanging out and being supportive, so thanks so much. I have enjoyed playing for you. It's so nice to be playing some shows in person again, so thank you, Internet. So this last song here, this is called Straits of Mackinac. And I wanted to do this in kind of a finger style guitar playing technique that sort of is a rip-off, but not as good of a rip-off as James Taylor. You might be familiar with James Taylor. In fact, I'll tell you a story real quick. How I got started in the whole idea of playing music was at the age of 5. I went to a James Taylor concert with my parents. You know, they were hippies and stuff. And they loaded up the station wagon, and James happens to be good family entertainment, but my folks always played the records at the house. So from the age of 3 even, I was like, oh, this guy is my hero. There's something about his finger-picked acoustic guitar that just resonated with me. So I had long ago decided, even by the age of 5, he was my hero. So we go to the show, and we're at Poplar Creek, which is a now defunct outdoor amphitheater around here. And so we're up on the lawn, and I brought my plastic guitar with rubber bands for strings to the show. And I'm bandying about the lawn out there with the lawn creatures. They don't care what you do up on the lawn. So I'm regaling them with my, toy guitar. The show starts, I'm enraptured, and then like halfway through the show, I say to my parents, well, I want to meet him. 5-year-old kid thinks those things can be arranged pretty much on the spot, no problem. Okay, well, there's 18,000 people here who would like to meet him. But we noticed that there was an individual, flower vendor. He was selling roses. And people were buying these and taking them down the aisle to the foot of the stage and laying the rose on the foot of the stage in their gesture of appreciation to JT. So probably to appease me more than anything, thinking that I could at least get close to my hero, we decided to go get a flower. So what happened is I was at the show with my mom and dad, my brother and sister, and myself. My mom and my brother stayed on the lawn seats, their lawn seats to defend the turf. And my dad and my sister and myself got a rose, and I carried it, and we walked down the pavilion to the foot of the stage. And I'm holding the rose and standing there, just about to lay it on the foot of the stage. James Taylor finishes a song. He takes his guitar off his shoulder and puts it down and comes over to the foot of the stage and picks me up. Yeah. And so now I'm on stage with the preeminent singer-songwriter of the 1970s. And I remember, people ask, do you remember that? You bet I do. Yeah, that was a pivotal moment in my life, And I remember he asked me what my name was, how old I was, and if I was having fun. And I remember thinking that he looked very sweaty and wrinkled, and that there was a sink, toward the wings of the stage that was visible. And I thought, that's not rock and roll, man. But anyway, so our little exchange lasted probably 15 seconds, and he put me down. And then I started walking up the pavilion with my dad and sister who were waiting. And, I was getting high fives on either side of the aisle, and there was the spotlight on me for a little bit. Not much of that time, but a little bit of the time. And I just thought, well, who wouldn't want a career in show business? This is great, So anyway, that influence comes to life in this song with the finger picking. But it's not as good as JT because he's really got a very distinct style. Anyhow, this song is called Straits of Mackinac. What happened is this summer we went up there and we stayed right in the shadow of the bridge, Mighty Mac, which is a huge, long suspension bridge, bigger than the Golden Gate. And you've got Lake Huron to your right and Lake Michigan to your left, and I'm a Great Lakes Maritime shipwreck enthusiast, so we went up to the Shipwreck Museum at Whitefish Point, Lake Superior. So in the course of 3 days, you cross off 3 of the Great Lakes, and there's all this blue water laying around you, and you're thinking, the world's not such a bad place, really. This is not bad. And then your second thought, if you're like me and you have a little wanderlust, you say, so why would I ever go home? Why would I do that? But you have to go home. So then what you do is you take the long way home. That's the only thing I can come up with. Take the long way home. Draw it out a little bit longer. So we did the circle tour up through the UP, the Wisconsin side. You have some of those sweeping vistas of Lake Michigan, and there's some dunes up there and stuff, and just gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. So this song came about as a result of that experience. Straits of Mackinac. And and that'll close up the show. And I guess the only thing I would say in addition to it is I love the lakes, and I love the story, history of them, and just to know that they can behave as violently and unpredictably as the world's oceans are just awesome, true wonders of force. So wonderful resource to have here. So, thanks, folks. Here we go. Round here the days are all just the same. Restlessness took me north to the shipping lanes of those lakes, of those big blue lakes, with the fortunes and widows they make. Now I'm leaning on all the fine things I saw upon the streets of Mackinac. Well, the farm is seated deep within my life, but its day is done, so I left, found a wife, went to work there near Johnsburg town, but I stayed primed for moving around, and I'm leaning on all the fine things I saw upon the streets I'm backing on. Coffee was on, I was telling tales with friends on a day that put us on the road again. Headed home the long way around, talking up those fair coastal towns, and I'm leaning on all the fine things I saw on the streets of Mackinac, on the streets of Mackinac. Thank you, folks. Thank you.
Wasn't it great? Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. You can check this out anytime that's convenient for you, which is great about having a YouTube channel for the Addison Public Library. Just a quick heads up, we're going to have the Haunted Page Trick and Tale for October Eves tonight in the large meeting room here at the Addison Library. Thank you once again so very much, Dave Martin. Love it. Loved having you. Wonderful stories. Thank you.